Welcome back to Getting to the Top, where we interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey. Today, I have the distinct honor of interviewing Ms. Diane Edwards. She's led the Professional Services Unit and the Consulting and Executive Education arm of the Mona School of Business and Management for 1 year. Her focus is to grow the consultancy into an internationally recognized partner for business and government by providing world-class management consulting, executive education, and short courses. During her tenure, the unit has introduced 8 new courses, announced a partnership with the global market leading Digital Marketing Institute, and broadened its consultancy outreach to the Caribbean. She joins from a 9-year career as president of JAMPRO, where we met. And JAMPRO is Jamaica's investment and export promotion agency, where she and her team led the expansion of the business process outsourcing sector from 12,000 employees to 60,000 employees, and attracted investment in 12,000 new hotel rooms, and were instrumental in driving the government's business environment reform agenda. From 2003 to 2013, she led the expansion of J. Ray & Nephew UK Limited as general manager and director, achieving the company's first years of profitability, listings in major West End on-trade outlets, and in the top 4 British supermarket chains, and building the company's turnover by 77%. And she has done much more than that. But on top of all of those things, she's absolutely a delight. She's a treasure. She's incredible. She's intelligent. And I will say this, has one of my favorite bios because she's very clear about what she's achieved and how she has contributed and the transformation that she's delivered. Welcome, Diane.
Thanks, Racquel. Wow, what an intro. And thank you for being so effusive. You know, it kind of doesn't feel like I've been around as long as all those things you said.
It's true, because you are as fresh as a daisy every time I talk to you. But I love that you understand exactly who you are and what you have been able to deliver. So we always start out by talking about how it all started and what were your first aspirations career-wise when you were a little girl. What did you think you were going to do?
I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist, to be honest.
Really? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
that was where I started.
I always say that crazy people want to be psychiatrists.
Well, I'm fascinated by the brain and the mind and what you can achieve with it and how you can expand it. And so that kind of led me around a number of different paths, because when I realized you had to become a medical doctor before becoming a psychiatrist, that was a bit of a chastening experience. And I said, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. So I think part of my challenge has been that I've been good at a number of things, and that my mind is really very expansive. I'm kind of like a Renaissance woman. Mm-hmm. So I love a lot of things. You know, I'm fascinated by certain aspects of science, particularly biology, because one of my other loves was marine biology. Oh, nice. And I'm also fascinated by languages. So in the end, I decided I was going to do languages because I fell in love with French and Spanish. So my first degree is really in languages. But then I realized that there are some inhibiting things about languages, and I didn't want to teach, and I didn't want to be an interpreter. I felt that interpreting was too mechanical. So I wanted something, again, more expansive. So then I went into international relations and kind of segued into MBA from there. And so I've kind of stretched my mind in different directions, I would say. It was more of a roundabout way of coming to bring certain elements together that I love, and not so much going on a unit channel, very directional career. I haven't been able to do that. So I'm not necessarily going to tell anyone to follow what I did because it's probably, you know, I've been extremely lucky. Opportunities have come my way. And what I would say about that is that if you really are a broad thinker and you open yourself to a lot of different experiences, you attract things to yourself that almost make the next career move really seamless, and you know, you don't have to put in too much effort. I've been lucky in that sense.
And you find that a lot, people who are willing to be both broad in terms of their scope, but deep in terms of their passions, tend to attract all kinds of opportunities to them. Because coming from a language background, you would not imagine that you would be the titan in business that you've been. Typically, people who study languages, okay, they work for the UN, or like you said, they're a translator, but you're not necessarily seeing someone taking that path. So when you graduated with this degree in languages, what was the first job?
Well, I actually didn't go straight into work. I got a scholarship to go to France to do international relations. And it was after I did that that I got into work. So my first job was with UNESCO, actually, which is exactly what you're saying, international organizations, because I've always been a global thinker. I've always really been fascinated by global development and how international relations impacts on economic development. So UNESCO was actually a great breeding ground for me, a great place to be, to enhance some of that thinking. And it gave me a more regional outlook and a more international outlook. So I loved what I did there. It was a lot of about project development and helping really create the UNESCO Office of the Caribbean, because I like creating new initiatives. I really do love that. And so I was right there on the ground creating this new office, which would serve the whole Caribbean, and helping countries to put together their country programs that would really develop a lot of the things I'm passionate about: education, science and technology, and culture. So, yeah.
So you get this opportunity in France of all places. What did your parents think about you jetting off to France for this UNESCO opportunity?
Well, my mother was a bit apprehensive, because the thing is, I mean, I was 20, I was going off to a country where they knew no one, where I knew no one. I was going to study at a place they had never heard of, Institut d'études politiques de Paris. So they were a bit apprehensive, but what I loved about my parents was they really gave me my chances. They never ever tried to hold me back. They always said, you know, you go try it out, give it your best shot. And as my mom used to say, angels can do no more. So that's it. So I just kind of threw myself into it, and it was exciting and it was different. It was a different cultural challenge, of course. I think, you know, when I started there, to be honest, I wasn't really that serious about this school until I realized how important a school it was, because it was the French, it still is the French equivalent to a Harvard Business School.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I mean, I thought I was going to have a gay old time for a year, but then realized that it was academically very challenging. And it's a totally different way of learning, because they have what they call the Cartesian method, which is very structured and a lot of oral work. So you were marked on class participation, which is not so strange nowadays, but you had to do these exposés in 10 minutes, and it had to be thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and it was all very organized. So it was quite an interesting cultural experience. And then you had the whole melting pot of the Africans, the Francophone Africans, the Caribbean Francophones. And, you know, I was in a totally Francophone world for 2 years before I came back to the region.
But I think that's wonderful, right? Because that would have developed not only your sort of worldview, because you were always very global, but it would have also developed like your presentation skills, having to do these presentations in a language that's not your home language, and be on your toes, and to express your thoughts and ideas and the things that you learned. That had to, I mean, at the time, I'm sure it was incredibly challenging, but the growth and the development from that, absolutely, you know, priceless.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, some of the skills I learned then, definitely and I think as a woman, these lessons are really critical to your future development, because You learn to operate in a world that's very male dominated. You learn to operate outside of your own language, even in such subjects as statistics and economics in French. And then they had this very oral way of dealing with things. So you had to learn presentation skills. You had to learn to operate under pressure. So all of these things stood me in good stead for future career choices, because I've always had to do presentations. So yeah, it's a great breeding ground. And in fact, I think the methods, the teaching methods also, I think, are really useful for your own personal development.
So we'll go back to the job now, where you're creating something new for the region on a global scale from this global organization. And I think that's also such a great training ground as well, right? When you're building something from scratch, it's like Lego. You understand all of the pieces that contribute to making this thing work. And you get some trial and error, you get some, well, in order to have this, we need to have that. And so that helps so much with ultimately being able to run an organization, because you have created something from scratch. You have assembled all of the individual components to pull this thing together. So at the time, did you recognize that this was an opportunity to take that kind of, to ultimately have a leadership role? Or were you just thinking, well, this is fun and I'm enjoying creating it, so here's these pieces coming together, and this is just fine?
It's kind of a bit of both. So I enjoyed doing it. It was new, it was different. And then I realized also that I really do enjoy this creating something new and giving back. And so when they were actually starting the investment promotion office in Jamaica, they recruited me for that role. And even though I was only 2 years into the UNESCO role, I sort of felt that I was too young to do some of the things that I wanted to do in UNESCO. So I wanted a different challenge. And I am somebody who thrives on challenge and novelty and something different. So I went off to do that. And then a year and a half into that, they recruited me to go to New York. So that was another opportunity to expand my mind again. And then that allowed me to do my MBA at night, you see. So again, I wanted to have more of a commercial injection into my knowledge base. And so that allowed me to do that. And then they asked me to go and create an office on the continent of Europe and to scout locations. So it was another opportunity to start something from nothing. So yeah, I guess that has been a theme kind of throughout what I've done, either starting from absolutely nothing or starting from a low level, which I did with Ray and Nephew, and building that up into something much bigger. And I guess that's where I am now, having left JAMPRO, having, left, I think, my imprint on JAMPRO after 9 years. Now I'm back in a situation where this is a really small operation, and I am hell-bent on doubling and tripling the revenue that we can bring in for the university.
But I love the fact that you are looking at things from that measurement perspective, because so often we sort of get into something and you're already, into the role and thinking doubling the, so you have a very, very clear and simple goal, so that it's easy for you to understand, am I progressing according to the plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that is something that so many of us miss. You get into the role and then you're kind of, fumbling about, and you're not sure what is the goal and what am I working towards, and how do I know when I've achieved it, and how do I measure that achievement, right?
I think that measurement is really critical, because you need to have a baseline to know where you're starting and where you want to go. And if you can quantify that, it's much, much easier to measure. In Ray and Nephew, I had to learn to quantify what they call an actual case of a certain volume of alcohol and what was a standard case, and to measure how we were achieving more through expanding the number of standard cases we were selling. You know what I mean? So, and now I'm back in a situation, a commercial situation, where I can say the revenue on the management consultancy side is X, and the revenue on the executive education side is Y. So I can measure exactly how far we are going. And that measurement, as I say, I think is really critical in life.
What's the
And
difference
it
between
just
an
teaches
actual
you.
case and a standard case?
Well, it's so an actual case is really, you know, most bottles of alcohol that are sold in Europe are 70 centiliters. So a standard, you reduce everything to the volume of alcohol, which is 8.4 liters, is a standard case. So that's simplifying it, because the Americans do it slightly differently.
Okay, so I've never heard that difference.
So I just had to throw myself. No, none of this I knew before I got into the business. So that was really a steep learning curve to get into an industry that I knew precious little about, other than being a consumer. You know, but it was a fun business, and that's why I say I've been really lucky, because I had a lot of fun in that role. Because you got some hardcore figures and targets that you have to meet, but at the same time, the building of the brand is a lot of fun, you know?
Yeah. But how, there are all of these things, you're building the office in New York, you're creating this office in Europe, and it seems that you're being recognized to do these things, and from a relatively young age. How did you get that visibility that they're like, you know what, I want Diane to do this. I think Diane would be great at this. I want her to open up this office in New York. I wanted to expand this thing to Europe. How is that happening? And I hear you on luck, but I think it's luck that meets preparation and talent. But how are you being recognized in order for them to find you to do these things?
I think you have to put yourself into certain situations and be assertive. You can't be a wallflower, you know? So when I was in Paris and I decided that UNESCO was a place I wanted to work from, I was at school there. I went to the UNESCO office, I connected with them, I tried to find out who was in charge for the Caribbean, and actually asked that person for a meeting and went and met with them. So I kind of had it all lined up before I came back to Jamaica. So I think putting myself out there and really meeting the right people, and to be honest, targeting people that I thought I needed to meet and to know. I think that's always important, and really building on relationships. You know, I believe you're 1 degree of separation from anyone you want to know on the planet, especially if you're a Caribbean person,
I think
because
so
we
too.
have people everywhere you can imagine. So if we want to look, I mean, we have the Vice President of the United States who has Caribbean roots, you know, Jamaican
Yes.
roots. So we can go all over the world and just link up with the people that we know. So I think that's one way I've really been able to do this, because my first boss was actually Guyanese. He worked for UNESCO, but he was Guyanese. I linked up with him in Paris while I was studying there. My second boss, Karine McClarty, I met her through, I don't remember who exactly, but through connections in Jamaica. And these are not all only family connections, because I know not everyone has family connections, but you really need to leverage your relationships in life. And I think I've done that pretty successfully. And also, as a woman, and I keep coming back to this, to be assertive. I was very lucky to be a tomboy when I was young, and my father really wanted a boy. So I got a lot of input from him in terms of socialization and the people he knew. And from my mother, I really got social skills, how to do things for people that you will get back, you know, in return, and how to just socialize with people, and also ask for what you want. I find a lot of women don't ask for what they want. They
Absolutely.
think it'll come to them, and sadly, it won't necessarily. You got to go out and ask for it, and
Yeah.
especially ask for help. So I asked for help from a lot of people. And
And
people
being
have
willing
always,
to help, to be helpful as well, right? So that
yeah,
way, it all comes full circle because you're being helpful, you're networking, you're socializing, you're having at least a plan in your mind, you're reaching out to people,
mhm,
you're using your connections to reach out to people, but you're also being recognized for the great work that you're doing and taking chances, right? Because
yeah.
like going into Ray and Nephew, that must have been as fun as we all know that it would be, that must have been intimidating as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I went into a company which was losing money and I had to turn that around. I was the youngest person on the staff. I was one of the few females, the only other females who are in administration. And I'm going in with mainly older white British men.
Wow.
So there were a lot of and I knew nothing about the industry. So who was I, as one of them actually told me, to come there and tell them how to do the business they'd been doing for 30, 40 years.
That's losing
So
money.
exactly. So, I mean, it was a huge challenge. And I admit that for the first 3 months, I was floundering. I was feeling like overwhelmed with the barrage of information coming in and overloaded. You know, what on earth am I going, how am I going to make sense of all of this? But I was very determined that I was going to make sense of it and was going to make it a success and use the fact that I was different to my advantage. Because when you walk
Mm.
into a room of 1,000 older white men, you are immediately obvious. And a lot of them are curious, and so they kind of look at you. Well, I mean, who's this strange bird here, you know, and what are you doing here? So by the time I'd done talking to them at these great vintners balls that they have in London, um, they all knew who I was. They all knew, at least they knew the name Appleton because they knew Appleton is that woman there. So, you know what I mean? You use everything you can to stand out, and don't be afraid to stand out.
I
So
love that. I love that. Be willing to be conspicuous because you can't hide when you're different. You can't hide when you're the only one in the room that looks the way that you do. So use that instead as a disadvantage. Understand that all eyes are on you and use that to your advantage. They're all going
absolutely.
to know who you are. They're all going to know your name. You can use that to, strike up a conversation and meet someone new. But
Exactly.
what
And build your brand.
build the brand. Oh, so brilliant. But where did this commercial mindedness come from? Because I think it is something that is in short supply for men and women, but you're not getting enough people who have that very strategic commercial mind that says, this is the goal with the business. The business is losing money, and my role is to turn things around or to, where did that come from? Where did that start?
You know, I think funnily enough, it's because I try to serve a higher purpose. And
Mm.
that sounds funny, but I mean, for Ray and Nephew, losing money was not an option because that means the business will go out of business and Jamaicans will be out of work. So I had to really sit down and look. I guess I'm very analytical, and I think I got that from my father, who was a lawyer. And I've always liked to analyze things and understand how they work. So I had to get into the bowels of the business really and understand, why were we losing money? Why were we not maximizing the products with the highest margin? And some of that, I guess, comes from the business school training as well, because the MBA does teach you how to analyze a number of things like that. But the strategic part of my mind is really that creativity in a sense, and that vision and that determination to achieve that vision that you have. Um, and I guess some of that comes from the competitiveness I had as a tomboy, because I was the second fastest kid in junior school, and the fastest was a boy, and my ultimate goal was to beat him. So it was very clear from early on, setting yourself goals and going after them. And I think that's what has So it's analysis, it's strategy, and it's determination and competitiveness, all those things that I think are actually quite, to some extent, innate in Jamaicans, and we don't always develop those skills that way, especially as women, because you're not really supposed to be competitive. But I guess because I was a tomboy, I never had any apology for being competitive. It's just my nature. And I think you also have to accept who you are, you know, and not try to, well, a lot of women try to hide their light and dumb themselves down. And I'm absolutely not on board with that. I try to help all the young women I know to go out there and be themselves and not to dumb themselves down, which sometimes can be challenging.
Yeah, and you will receive, as a woman, you will receive pushback for being who you are, or for shining bright. And you have to understand that that isn't your problem. That is somebody else's problem. You have to live authentically as you are. And I love this analysis, strategy, determination, and competitiveness. So now take me to JAMPRO, because I mean, when you came on the scene at JAMPRO, it was quite a splash. And I think there was a great deal of excitement. And I love how much, like, the BPO sector in Jamaica has just simply exploded under your leadership. So talk to me about, you come into this new organization, they're trying to, they had rebranded and they rebranded again, and they're trying to figure out how do they get this thing moving. What was that like coming in? Because as much as JAMPRO was already in existence, this would have been like creating something new, because it was a whole new approach for JAMPRO.
It was, and I think one of the things I brought to JAMPRO was a deep understanding of the private sector and commercial realities and what it is to operate in the commercial world. So it wasn't difficult for me to operate with the private sector. And I think the most important thing that I was able to do was to bring JAMPRO into the world of the private sector. I used to say we were a public agency with a private sector ethos. Because one of our board members actually paid me what I thought was the supreme compliment. He said, I forget that you're public sector. And I really like that, because I wanted JAMPRO to become the voice of the private sector within government. So you are kind of a halfway house. So my vision of JAMPRO was really to be a sales and marketing organization. And I came there with that very clear focus and vision. JAMPRO, prior to me coming there, had seen itself as a facilitator of business. But that's a reactive position as far as I'm concerned. So I wanted us to be proactive, to go out and look for business. But then I was coming from a sales and marketing organization, just that the product had changed. And instead of rum, it was now, selling a country. And I loved that idea because I loved the breadth that it gave us. And so for me, it was then about analyzing where is our competitive advantage and what are the critical elements that we need to move in order to have an impact on Jamaican society. At the time, the biggest issue was employment. So how can we find a way to create more jobs in the shortest possible time? And BPO was definitely one of those options, because it's an industry that creates jobs really quickly, thousands of jobs, in 6 months. So we really set about focusing on that industry and doing a 5-year strategic plan of how we were going to grow that industry, all the inputs, the elements that were needed from a regulatory point of view, from an infrastructure point of view, telecommunications, the whole 9 yards. And that we set about deliberately implementing that plan. And similarly for tourism, because again, tourism, you can employ a lot of people. When you're building a 200-room or 1,000-room hotel, you're employing a lot of people construction-wise, and then you're employing a lot of people to run the hotel. So those two industries, we felt, were the quickest ways we could make an impact on unemployment. And unemployment today is between 4% and 5%.
Yeah. And I
where
think,
it was 13% when I came back to Jamaica in 2013.
wow.
So I think we had quite an impact on that. I mean, now it's a different set of challenges.
Mhm.
So, but I think with JAMPRO, I really was able to turn it around. I led a big restructuring exercise, which was really to turn it into more of a sales and marketing organization. And I think we accomplished that.
What I love about this turnaround story is the not just the impact on unemployment, but the impact on youth unemployment, which we all know is so much higher than regular unemployment. And so you have vibrant, like vibesy young people who are now getting into jobs where they can showcase their talents and, they're providing services over the phone. And I remember going on a tour of a BPO center after when it was really starting to take off in Jamaica. And it was so like, it felt like such a vibe. And I loved this for the young people because they were like excited to go to work and to be able to be engaged and to be a part of supporting their family.
They absolutely were. One of the most heartwarming episodes we had was we were able to get one company to come and set up on campus here. And
Nice.
the head of the company came to the opening and read out a letter from a young man who said, because of this job, I am able to complete my degree because I was on the verge of dropping out because I couldn't afford to keep on paying my tuition fees. And my mother got ill and I'm her sole support. But because of this job, I was able to weave it into my schedule and now I'm able to complete my degree. And I thought that was like, wow, this is really
Yeah.
making an impact on someone's life. And that's what you work for.
Yeah, I like that though. Most people that you find that are commercially minded aren't necessarily focused on the higher purpose, right? And I think that's part of the challenge in capitalism, right? It
Mhm.
seems that you're pursuing profit at the expense of the higher purpose. But this is for you a combination of the two, pursuing the higher purpose and using profitability to be able to fund that, to be able to fund jobs, to be able to fund employment, to be able to fund societal change, to enable people to continue their degrees. I love the idea of the BPO center on the campus so that people can go to school and work because there are only so many campus jobs.
Exactly. And
Ah,
the biggest, if you look at the biggest entrepreneurs on the planet, most of them, maybe with the exception of Elon Musk, most of them would say to you that they are working for a higher purpose and
yeah.
they are doing what they love. So, they want to create robots because they want to relieve human beings of manual, menial tasks and free the mind for other things. So, Walt Disney wanted to create a company that was providing entertainment and upliftment for people. So I think I have always said to the teams I've worked with, I've always tried to find that higher purpose because I think that's what inspires people to do more and to give more and to achieve more, you know. And I think that inspiration and perspiration are two of the biggest things that really have to come together if you want to achieve greatness.
So before we wrap up, the question I always ask is, what is the best advice that you've received?
Oh, I think I would say have a very clear idea of who you are and where you want to go and map your path to get there. And your path doesn't have to be a straight line, but I think self-knowledge is really important. Know who you are and what makes you happy and find your passion because it's really important
Mm.
to do what you're passionate about and not
Mm.
something that you actually hate doing and you're only doing it because you have to work to pay the rent. So
Yeah.
try to find your passion and then be prepared, with the qualifications and experience. In the world nowadays, I think you have to have breadth of experience and breadth of skills, because you don't know when you're going to need what skill, and we don't know what the jobs of tomorrow are going to look like. They don't even have names yet. So we need to be prepared for anything, for any eventuality. So I never thought I would use my languages in a business setting, but I definitely did. So I think that's also critical. Just be prepared for a range of opportunities, because now the young people now are going to have maybe 7, 8 jobs in their lifetime, whereas maybe I only had 4.
Really?
I think also find a mentor who can help you, with tips and advice and how to do things. I think that's really critical. Mentors have really helped me a lot in my lifetime. And also learn from your failures, because people in our culture tend to condemn you because, oh my God, you failed at something. But every entrepreneur has failed multiple times before they actually succeed. So I think learn from your failures is another one.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned Walt Disney, and he had like a string of failures before he became successful, and any reasonable person would have given up at the amount of rejection that he endured. But I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and I was saying, yeah, you haven't failed until you stop trying, right?
Exactly.
So that's the thing. Just you have to keep trying. And I love that pursue your passion. And while, some people are like, well, I like to watch TV. That can't be it. Although there are jobs doing that. But find the thing that you love most about wherever you are, and find a way to double down on that in the next thing that you search for, so that you're always pursuing something that lights you on fire and gets you out of bed in the morning, so that the work that you have to do feels like the work that you want to do. Diane, thank you so much. I knew this
Thank you,
conversation
Racquel.
was
It's
going to
been
be
a joy.
incredible.
It really has been a joy talking to you. We're so much in sync. We have so many harmonious ideas and thoughts and attitudes. I think it's been a great conversation. So thank you very much.
And I've missed being in the same industry with you. So the next time I'm in Jamaica, we'll have to catch up.
Definitely, we'll do.
For sure.
Great.
All right. And thank you so much for staying with us through this episode. I know that you would have learned a lot about your passion and your drive and your authenticity and your competitiveness, and making sure that you are pursuing what you need to, and don't be afraid of failure. That is how you fail your way into your success. And then think about how you can have breadth in your career, so that you're doing what you love, but you're also learning a lot of different skills, and network and be noticed. And if you are the only one in the room, use it as your superpower. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you.